This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 57, where today we're going to talk about some of the latest news in Microsoft Azure, recorded live November the 19th, 2014.
From Amsterdam and Orlando.
Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Lync, and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Chris Johnson.
And I'm Andrew Call.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it.
Hey, good morning, AC. How are things?
Doing good. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, thanks. It is afternoon, actually. I just had lunch.
I'm looking for breakfast.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Where are you?
I am in Orlando, Florida. I'm at the SP Live 360 conference with it's a cool little conference where it's a mix of a bunch of different tracks. So there's a Visual Studio track, there's an IT Pro track, there's a modern apps track, and a SharePoint track.
Oh, gotcha. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It's neat. It's I'm one of the two conference chairs. I do it with Matt McDermott, and we organize getting all the people down here and getting all the speakers. And so got a cool little lineup of speakers, people like Paul Schaefline, people like I said, Matt McDermott, Brian Alderman, Mark Rackley. Just a bunch of people that are down here. And then actually had from your team, had Sonia Koptev do our keynote yesterday. So it's an interesting week. We've got people coming in from all over. Agnes Molnar flew in from Hungary. So it's good times. So how about you? Where are you?
I am in sunny, well, it's not really, but it sounds better if I say sunny Amsterdam. So I'm over here in the Netherlands. And I'm at a conference over here called SharePoint Connect, which is a conference reasonably small, sort of quite community-led. It's got a really good feel to it. And so I'm over here for a couple of days. I head back to the States tomorrow.
So quick little trip, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'm suffering from jet lag really badly.
Just in time to go right home, right?
I know, exactly. I got a great night's sleep last night, and I'll head home and be all screwed up again.
So funny little thing. How cold is it over there for you right now?
I'd say probably it's probably 10 degrees Celsius. So that's in stupid units, that's probably, I'd say, mid-40s.
Mid-40s. Okay. So get this. We had this massive, the U.S. is going through this big, massive cold snap that's going through the country. And it finally got to Florida. We had a huge storm roll through on Monday. And yesterday, so we're recording this on a Wednesday. And on Tuesday, we walk outside and it's kind of chilly, but you still walk short sleeve shirt over to the conference center. It's like, it feels good. Wouldn't want to be out all day in a short sleeve shirt, but I can do it. Temperature dropped and dropped and dropped throughout the day. And last night we were at a lows at around 38 degrees, I think. So it's a trip because I live about 2 hours north of here. And I looked on my 38 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously. Otherwise it'd be really hot.
Yeah.
And I looked on my weather site that I used to check out the weather. And of course it defaults to home. And it said it was 74 degrees with tornado warning and hard freeze warning.
At the same time?
Yeah, it was a great picture. A buddy of mine took a picture of it. I'm friends with one of the meteorologists for one of the TV stations back at home. He took a picture of it. And he's like, I really don't know what to do with this.
Oh man, that sounds pretty brutal. I mean, it's cold over here, but it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Florida's kind of like, we don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. But hey, this week, I know in the next few weeks, you and I have some scheduling challenges with the show. I thought we'd just kind of mention to people, give them a little bit of a heads up on what's going on. But you're going to be going on vacation for a week or two with the family. And we weren't about to try and do any of the recordings during that time. And almost as equally, right before that is I'm having surgery, having a bunch of shoulder work done that's been bothering me for a while. But I'll be doped up on painkillers for a good week or two.
That's going to be a fun episode.
I was wondering, we might be doing outtake and just kind of see how it goes, but I don't know how much stuff I want to be on be recorded. But yeah, so what we've done, this is all going to start like at the beginning of December. And so what we're going to do this week, what I've done is I actually sat down and I interviewed Sonia after the keynote, talked about some things that you guys have been doing, your team has been doing. Sonia's on your team, was on CJ's team for the listeners that aren't familiar. And then there's a few other people that I've been interviewing or that I'm going to be interviewing this week. Hopefully they all happen and we don't have to cancel anything. But talking to Jeremy Thake as well, who's also on your team, talking to Paul Schaefline, have a really good discussion around identity for Azure and then how it also relates to Office 365. And then we'll dive into the dev stuff. And also doing an interview with Agnes Molnar from Hungary to talk about Office 365 search, SharePoint search, and Azure search, and to kind of get a good landscape on all those. So we're doing a few interviews like this week so we can continue to have episodes ship out on a regular schedule. But they'll be a little bit delayed and kind of as they come out. So just bear with us, but it's the holidays and tricky and stuff. Let's just say that hopefully we banked our points with all of the reactions we got from that helium intro that we did a couple episodes ago. We've gotten some really good reaction on Twitter for that.
That was funny. That was really funny. It did. We got a few really interesting comments, which was fun. Hey, so this week there's been a lot happening in the last couple of weeks. And we've had some interviews on the show over the last few weeks. And panel discussions and bits and bobs. So we thought we'd get a little bit, back to grassroots, so to speak, and do a bit of a news roundup about some of the things that have been going on in the Microsoft world and with Amazon and a little bit of Google news and things, and just sort of do a roundup of what's been going on over the last couple of weeks to catch people back up. So how about we get stuck into that?
That sounds good to me. Well, you want to lead us off?
Yeah. So I think the most obvious thing we should probably discuss is the news out of Microsoft that they're opening up .NET. They've been making moves in this space a little bit over the last year with opening up more stuff in this area. But I think the latest news the last week or so has really taken it to 12 on the dial, so to speak, and they're really they've decided to open source the core of .NET, which both you and I have been .NET guys for a long, long, long time, but this is a huge move for Microsoft.
Yeah, this was, I guess, in one sense, it's not too surprising seeing the way that the trends were going, seeing that they had open sourced ASP.NET a couple weeks or months prior, out Office on the iPad and stuff, but then just to come out and show like what the significance of this is, and then come out and say it, man, this is a completely different company than it was 2 years ago. Anybody that would have said that they would have seen this coming 2 years ago, I'm gonna sit there and pick up the phone and dial 1-800 bullshit on this one. There's no way. This is amazing. Yeah. So what exactly was announced? Like what exactly did they say? Like what they're doing with the .NET platform?
I guess we should say that there have been moves in this area before. Like we should really talk a little bit about or touch briefly on Mono in the past and how it affects that going forward, because I think there are some questions about that. But so the move that Microsoft made is they're basically in steps publishing .NET Core, which is, if I understand correctly, maybe you can correct me if I've got this wrong as well, but there's really two parts to it. There's the CLR and there's the base framework libraries of .NET, right?
Yeah, base class library, BCL.
Yeah, gotcha. And so the CLR is all about running. I think maybe I'm oversimplifying this a little bit, but the CLR is all about running code on whatever platform. And then the base libraries are all about, helping developers build programs, right, with common functions and classes and all that sort of stuff. And so you really need the two to go hand in hand to go build an application. And so they're open sourcing them, publishing them on github.com, and also making available, I guess is probably a better term, to allow you to run .NET code on iOS, right? I think it's iOS.
Well, I thought it was on OS X and Linux.
Sorry, yes, OS X, that's correct. Yep, not iOS. I'm getting confused there with the O's. So yeah, OS X.
You're confusing your news.
Yeah, exactly. There's too many O's. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, so OS X and on Linux, which is crazy. And I think this is where a little bit of the confusion comes from with Mono, because Mono was a open source version of a .NET implementation, right? So that you could write .NET code and run it on those platforms already. But it was never the actual .NET from Microsoft, right? So it wasn't exactly the same and intended to be mostly the same, but there were differences. So I think there's been moves made to, or at least the future of Mono, to bring the two together over time and work together on producing one stack to run on those platforms, which is really cool because it means as a .NET developer that your world just suddenly exploded into a massive opportunity on a bunch of new platforms. Being able to compile stuff and run it on different OSs is really, really interesting. And it's an interesting move for .NET in general because now with Xamarin, you're able to compile .NET down to native code for iOS and Android. And now with .NET, you'll be able to run it on OS 10 and Linux and Windows. So really, like, it makes .NET a really interesting language for developers to target, because you automatically get a whole bunch of benefits on those different platforms.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's pretty significant, because when you want to build something in the past on .NET, you basically were saying, I'm targeting the Windows platform. And now you really are targeting anything. So it gives us the promise, at least, or the opportunity, and a lot remains to be seen if there's any kind of, I'm not being jaded when I say this, but there needs to be a lot of stuff that needs to happen. We need to see a lot of the execution, which is going to be a little tricky, I would assume. But again, the group that's the one that announced this and everything, they have a really good track record. So I have no reason to believe that this isn't going to happen. But it's being able to say, I'm going to build an application now, and it can run essentially on any platform that's out there, any major platform that's out there between Windows, OS X, and the Mac platform, or on Linux. The same way that if I want to do anything today with like Java or Node.js, that I can run it on any platform. I'd be curious to see how some of the things like that are maybe Windows specific in the base class library, how those things get ported over. I know what you were just saying. I read the same news. I'm kind of curious to see how the whole mono thing shakes out, because from the layperson who's not really deep into this space of building for a cross-platform .NET with mono, my question is, where does mono fit into this? Because to me, it kind of seems that if Microsoft does this, does that not kind of kill off mono? Because you don't really need it, right? Because then the question is, well, why would I build for mono, which is the cross-platform open source of .NET, which is always kind of lagging on features a little bit from .NET, because they're, after .NET comes out with a new thing, mono then has to implement it for cross-platform, so they lag behind .NET. If Microsoft is leading and saying we do it everywhere, then I'd have to, as a customer, I'd say, or as a developer, I'd say, well, why would I build for mono when I'm basically trying to emulate .NET on like OS X or on Linux? So I'm curious to see where that goes. But I mean, just the fact that they've come out so heavy and said this platform that has been such a Microsoft-centric thing going all the way back to 2000 or 2001, and here we are at the end of 2014, and they're sticking the flag in the sand and just saying, we're going open source. It is so cool to see how this company is really going to holding true to the mantra that they've had, which is we're a cloud company first, we're a services company, we're a mobile company, and it really shows how much of a step away from being we are a Windows company that Microsoft is, and showing how things like .NET open source, cross-platform, and I mean, I know you and I are both close to this, but seeing the same thing being adopted in the Office 365 space, and seeing how 365 is such a growing platform, and then having the different SDKs that are available on the different platforms. It's really, I mentioned it to Sonia yesterday when she did her keynote. It's like, I think that yesterday was probably the first time that I can say that I've sat in a room for a Microsoft presenter who's presenting on a Mac and showing Xcode and stuff running that's on Microsoft technologies. It's like, that was freaking awesome.
That's pretty badass, yeah.
Yeah. So this is really cool. I mean, I know that they've done a bunch of stuff too. They're going to do a bunch of updates around. You'll be able to do stuff in Xcode and have it run and build on the Visual Studio Online build servers. All this news came out, and of course, the first thing that I gravitated to as someone who lives on OS X is, when do I get a copy of Visual Studio running native on OS X?
Yeah, that'd be nice for you, wouldn't it?
I mean, I had no insight into this. Obviously, there's no like, I'm not holding anything back from an NDA or anything like that, but Xcode is one thing. But to me, I'm not a big fan of the Xcode IDE. I'm a big fan of Visual Studio. It's really the only reason I fire up a Windows VM is to get in to open up Visual Studio. And I posted one or two things to some on Twitter, and there's friends with some guys on the Visual Studio side on Facebook, and I made a comment to one guy, and I was like going, what I really want is Visual Studio native on OS X. And I love the response he gave to me. He was just like going, well, we can't say everything at one time now, can we? And I'm like, what did you just imply? And he's like, I didn't imply anything. I just said we can't announce everything at one time, and not to imply that anything's under development. I'm like, you know what? That's all I need. That's all I need. That's all I need. That will be freaking amazing if Visual Studio is on OS X one day. But
wouldn't it be? Yeah.
I can hope.
Yeah, I guess for now you still got to run a VM.
Yeah. It's really cool to see the company do this and just have it bump and made me look at the stock price and made me regret selling my stock when it was around 27 or so, because now it's almost double that. So
yeah, it's bumping on 50. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, it's really cool to see, other than just the sheer fact of actually doing this, I think what's really cool to see is the community reaction to it, which really makes me buzz, right? Like, it's one thing to say, yep, we're open sourcing all this stuff. It's another thing to have everybody get behind it, and the reaction's been really amazing, and which is just awesome, right? Everybody's really fizzing about it and thinking it's really cool. So it's cool to have done it, but it's cool to see the reaction and have people really excited and getting on board and wanting to help out. And you know, one of the things I saw that we all commented on was the first commit back into the .NET Core libraries. I think the first community commit into GitHub drew some attention, and we all chimed in on the comment thread on the commit or on the pull request, and it got merged into the master branch pretty fast, and it was a correction for a test case I think maybe it was a German test case, or there was some problem in a particular German scenario, and so the guy fixed it, committed it, went back into master. Microsoft accepted it, and the community went nuts on the comment thread. It was really fun.
It really was. Yeah, from the dev side, as you were just talking a second ago, it dawned on me that we hadn't talked about the fact that they put the whole .NET Core in a repo inside of GitHub. So Microsoft didn't. This is not a public repository on like Visual Studio Online. They put the .NET framework, open source the entire thing, and put it in GitHub.
Yeah,
that in itself is a big freaking deal, right? So we got ASP.NET's in there, we got the .NET framework is in there, and then the guy put that post up, and it was really quick. And then all of a sudden, you see stuff floating around on Twitter going, "Holy crap! I think that was the first community pull request accepted and merged into the .NET framework." And it happened, if I'm not mistaken, it happened the afternoon of the announcement. Like, it was a really quick turnaround. And yeah, like you said, it's funny because the language gets a little colorful. Some of us started putting pictures in the comment thread, but we will definitely put a link to that in the show notes. I just added a note here to myself to go grab that link and put it in the show notes for the pull request, because it's that right there shows right away. It's like, it's one thing to say we're going open source. It's another thing to say, okay, now we're putting all the code out there. But holy crap, it's a third thing to take a community contribution and merge that in, especially merging it in that fast. That's really freaking cool.
Yeah, so now like up on GitHub, if you go up, you can go to github.com/Microsoft/.net, and as in DOTNET. And you can go see the source code. You can go fork it if you want. So far, they've got about 375 forks. And over 4,000 people have starred the repo, which sort of means that, they start following it and things. And and there's also links off to ASP.NET, Entity Framework, .NET Core, obviously the libraries, and then the .NET compiler, aka Roslyn. So that's pretty sweet. I just want to download it and use it just because that'd be kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah, me too. I want to just go poke around and have fun with it, because it's just too cool.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so we've got some more news to go through. Do you want to kick it off? We've got some Amazon news, we've got some Google news, we've got some more Office 365 news.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do the Azure news, and then there's a 365 nugget, and there's a Google nugget. The Amazon stuff, let's do that in a future episode, because I think they had a big conference recently for AWS. And there's a bunch of news that came out of that, so I figured we'd do that in a separate episode.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, so on the Azure news, there was a lot of stuff that came out and announced at TechEd Europe, and so definitely I would recommend people go check out the recorded keynote that you can get up on Channel 9. You had a bunch of cool stuff up there, but so I'll run through like two of these, and then I'll hand it back to you. So a couple things they did first. There's a lot of announcements on things that are new and in preview, and then things that have come out of preview into general availability. So one of the things that they did is Azure Automation and the Runbook Gallery. Those are now in GA.
Gotcha.
So what this does, we've mentioned it before on the show, but the automation enables the creation and deployment and monitoring and maintenance of resources in your Azure environment, and it uses a highly scalable workflow engine. This automation service, what you can do is you can use it to orchestrate anything that's like time-consuming or frequently repeated tasks. It's kind of like batch scripts and stuff. The associated runbook gallery is a way for, let's say that I do some stuff, I can create a runbook, and then I can put the runbook in a gallery, and then you could go grab it and use it later. It does a whole lot of stuff that's make things a little more automated and stuff, make it a little bit easier. So that's the automation and runbook gallery. They're in general availability. Another thing they did is they have this thing they're calling hyperscale event ingestion that you can use with event hubs. And so an event hub, just to recap, is a real-time, highly scalable, and fully managed data stream ingestion service. It's where you can pull data in quite a bit. And what they've done with this is they've got the ability to allow us to put tons and tons of data, and just like if you have a transactional based system that's got tons and tons of data that it spits out, Event Hubs is a great way to push all of that into these Event Hubs and then let them publish it out to multiple subscribers that want to be notified of it. That's one of the Azure PaaS offerings.
This seems pretty important for like Internet of Things, where you've got a lot of devices, streaming tons and tons of data into Azure, like lots of events happening in the world and from different devices, and all sort of being pushed up into the cloud, and then using a pub sub model to go deal with it, things like that.
Yeah. Do you want to take a couple here?
Yeah, sure. So we've got another one that I think people will be really interested in is instance level public IPs are now generally available. So we've touched on this briefly in the past, but I think this is super important for people that are running virtual machines up in Azure and want public IP addresses for those VMs. So such as, if you're running say an FTP server or something that you need sort of a predictable IP address on, then you can go and do that now. And also one other note that we've got down here on these is that there used to be that you're only able to get 2 of these in the past, I believe it was. But now that limit's been removed, on a per subscription basis, you can have more than 2 public IP addresses, which is kind of a nifty advance. So a lot of SharePoint people will be interested in this. People that are doing a lot of VM work, having those public IP addresses is kind of important.
Yeah. It's something like, I think you get 5 of them as part of your subscription as included in the cost. And then you can buy and reserve additional ones for a small monthly cost, and you then also get a certain allocation of remapping of the IP. So if I have one pointing to one VM, I could change it. But then once you go over that threshold, you can do additional remappings, but there's a small charge for it. And we're talking I think it's like pennies on the month or something like that. So it's not much at all.
Yeah, gotcha. What's your next favorite bit of news?
Oh, favorite bit. Let's see. I guess this one's going to kind of hit a little close to home for us because I know we're doing a startup that is similar to this, but there's a new service called Azure Batch, and this is in public preview. And so what this enables you to do, it's a platform service that's going to enable you to run large-scale parallel and HPC applications in the cloud, and it makes it very easy to cloud enable your applications and run jobs without setting up and managing like a cluster or a job scheduler. There's a whole SDK that's available with it to allows you to integrate your client apps through a bunch of different languages and then stage it to Azure and then build like job execution pipelines. Really useful to use as part of your workflows and deliver like self-service applications as a service to do like scale up of a bunch of machines that you want to do a bunch of stuff like testing and stuff like that. I say it's kind of close to home because we're working on our startup that will automatically shut down VMs, and this is something that honestly, I was looking at doing too, but not to say that it does everything that everyone's going to want. So, but it's cool. It's a cool little service that will allow people to kind of scale up and do a lot of like processing power with a bunch of VMs, and then shut them off after when all the work is done.
Actually, on similar lines, there's another bit of news on Web Jobs and a new SDK that have gone generally available for Azure. And so Web Jobs is kind of similar, not similar in some regards, but similar in others, in that it provides a way for you to basically create a piece of code that for things that you would typically do in some sort of background task. So think of this, a good scenario of this is, say you log a bunch of stuff to SQL, or you've got a whole bunch of temp data somewhere and you want to run some job in the background that goes and cleans that up periodically, then you can do that with this new feature called Web Jobs. And so you basically write a little program, much like a command line app, in fact, as you'd write a command line app in the past. You can take one of those, you can basically upload them into Azure websites and run it as this thing called a web job. And so on a scheduled basis, it'll go trigger and either on a predefined basis or on demand as well. And it'll go run your piece of code. So this is actually quite a tough problem in the past, where people have had to have worker roles in Azure to do sort of background processing, which meant that it was a costly exercise because you had to have a worker role sitting there running constantly and looking for work to do. And so web jobs are a much sort of lighter weight approach to this, where you can have just this sort of executable that kicks off every once in a while and does some work. And so for those of you who are building, simple Azure websites, and you're looking for some sort of background processing task system, much like you would do in SharePoint with a timer job, or a cron job and many other types of systems, this is a good approach for that kind of background processing that you might want to do.
Very cool. Yeah, and going along with that too, with the web jobs, one of the other things that they did is with, I guess, kind of similarly related, was with the websites, is that that now you can do the Azure websites. Another thing they added was Azure websites can now take advantage of virtual networks that you can set up with all the Azure networking stack. So that's another cool thing that they've announced there. I guess we should do a bit of a sidebar here, just so everyone can probably pick up on the fact that our audio is not ideal compared to, for this show compared to previous shows. We're dealing with conference internet and hard to find quiet areas for conference stuff. So it's if you hear a little bit of choppiness, sorry for the quality being not perfect, but it's the best we can do on this one.
Yeah, we apologize. Hey, something else that's kind of near and dear to my heart is Azure have opened up a new geography in Australia. So although New Zealand and Australia are different countries.
Are they?
Yeah, apparently. Apparently we sound similar or something, I don't know. Anyway, so there's now a new Azure geography in Australia, which is really cool for Australian and New Zealand companies, because they can locate their storage and that sort of thing closest to where they happen to be. So it's better for latency and all that sort of stuff, which is great, right? So it means that they can put resources closer to them. They'll be able to respond faster. It's also for things like data sovereignty issues. So say you've got a whole bunch of documents that you stick in storage or something like that. There are different legalities around doing that in different countries and different areas. And so for some customers in different industries, it's important to sometimes have that data in the location that they are based, for legal reasons or what have you, or regulatory reasons and things like that. So more data centers, more geographies is always a good thing. And so it's nice to see that open up.
Yeah, it really is. And being able to do, like, if you have a web application that's running up in Azure, if you have that, running a load balanced against multiple different data centers, and then using the Azure Traffic Manager to, based on where the request is coming in, sending that to the closest data center, so that now people that are in Australia or New Zealand, they're not going to hit an Azure data center for a website that's on the East US or that happens to be over in Japan or something like that. Now they can have Traffic Manager can route those requests instead to go hit the application and the new data center in Australia. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Microsoft is the only cloud provider that has the global footprint for data centers, because I know that the industry generally looks at Amazon or AWS as the leader in like the cloud story. But if I'm not mistaken, I think AWS only has data centers in the United States. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, but I can't really back that up with any hard facts.
Yeah.
We should look into that.
We don't want to let facts get in the way of a good story. But
totally. Ship it.
But
yeah.
I believe that's true. But that's pretty important, seeing that there's only one real cloud provider that is global. I mean, you've got Azure data centers in Europe. You've got them now in Australia. You've got them in Japan. You recently had one that was added to Brazil, and there's also one. They're the only cloud provider that has a data center in China too. That's a pretty big deal as well.
Yeah, if my facts are correct on this, I think maybe you can back me up on this. I don't know. I think Azure's up to 19 regions. Is that right? Something crazy like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, it's definitely something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a big advantage, and it's I guess it's one of the things that Azure's doing a little differently than AWS, and it's a selling point, right? So for businesses in different parts of the world, this is really important, not from just a speed perspective, but from a geo redundancy perspective, and also from legal reasons and things like that. It can be really, really important. And that's one of the big drawbacks of the cloud for some customers is, data sovereignty issues. And so the closer they can get their data to the countries of origin or the country that they live in, that can make a big difference to their business. So it's definitely a differentiator, and it'll be interesting to watch how that impacts sort of Azure versus AWS.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to correct myself that Amazon is not only in the U.S. For some reason, I thought that they were. I'm looking on their site right now, and they definitely have footprint in South America and Europe and also in APAC. So I was way off in saying that. I'm looking at the differences here. Definitely the primary presence appears to be in North America. And then there's a good bit in Europe, and a good bit in Europe it looks like too. So
yeah, we were way off base there.
Yeah, I'm just sending you a link too. You should take a look at that and see how way off base we really were. But it does make you feel a little bit better because it does say they do have AWS Edge locations, Seattle and Jacksonville, Florida. So both hometowns. That's pretty cool.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Hey, so moving on from Azure a little bit, should we go into some 365 news?
Absolutely.
This one's a curly one. Interesting, huh?
Yeah. So I know when this came out, it was during the MVP summit. I was out there, and there was a bunch of us had a little bit of confusion, and you were the one that went back and did a little bit of research on it. So why don't you tell us about Microsoft partnering up with Dropbox and tell us, what does this mean?
Yeah, this was what, like 11 or 12 days ago now. I think it was back on like the 6th of November or something along those lines. But yeah, Microsoft have done a deal with, or a partnership, I should say, with Dropbox. And what this means is that when you go get Office applications, Dropbox will now be an additional storage location alongside the other ones that you had already. So like OneDrive, for example. And so what this means for people will be, for those of you who've got iPads, for example, when you open up Office on the iPad, you'll be able to go open up documents from within Office. You'll be able to go into your Dropbox and open up documents from Dropbox and save them back to Dropbox. And in the past, this was only possible with local file storage from your device or from OneDrive. So this is kind of a big deal for Office users on those devices. And you can start using this today. So the Office apps have been updated to take this into account, so you'll be able to go open up documents and get started.
Yeah, that's really cool because I know that's one of the things. There's not everybody's on OneDrive, but just give the customers the choice. Don't sit there and shoehorn people into saying you have to use this. This is part of the whole I refer to as like part of the whole new Microsoft that I see, where the old model was that if you're a Microsoft customer, use only Microsoft stuff. And now it's more of if you're a Microsoft customer, that just means that you use one of our services, and we integrate with all these other platforms that are out there as well, and all these other data providers and stuff. So if you're not using OneDrive today, you're using Dropbox instead, hey, you can play just as easily with them. So it's very cool to see.
Yeah. So another thing that goes hand in hand with this is that we should really talk about, or at least touch on, is that the Office team announced that Office for iPhone and iPad would be free for consumers to use. It was free, but it was a more limited version, so you could read documents for free, but then for editing documents, you had to get an Office 365 subscription that would open it up and you could start editing. So now for consumers, it's free to do all of that. So that's a real bonus for folks with Office on those devices.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a big deal. I mean, being able to having Office for free on your tablet of choice, that's a big freaking deal. That's really cool.
And also in hand with that was a preview that we announced for Android tablets too. So Office is coming to Android tablets.
Awesome.
Kind of a big deal for for the Office ecosystem and the Office universe.
Yeah, totally agree. Good stuff. Yeah. So hey, let me jump back. Let me do one little thing, two little Azure things that we did, and then we'll move on to our last one, being the Google news here. One of the things they did that in the last few weeks, there's an organization called the Professional Association of SQL Server, or yeah, I think that might have been right. I might have just messed it up. It's PASS, P-A-S-S. And they had their conference in Redmond just recently, and they were talking a little bit about SQL, and they had two SQL-related things that were there were more kind of like previews and things looking forward. So the first one is around Azure SQL databases. And so what Microsoft is committed to is later this year, they're going to preview a new version of it that's going to be a big deal for this whole database as a service concept. So in this preview that they're going to have, they're going to add SQL Server capabilities that make it easier to extend and migrate apps to the cloud, including support for larger databases than what we can handle today, with online indexing, parallel queries, and improved T-SQL support for Azure SQL databases. The preview is also going to unlock the in-memory cornerstone, which is going to deliver greater performance for data marts and continue the Microsoft's SQL Server journey to bringing in-memory technologies to the cloud. All of these preview capabilities are going to be introduced and offered to the service as part of the service tiers that they announced earlier in the year, which give you, again, larger database sizes, 4 nines availability, restore and geo-rep capabilities, and predictable performance. And then the other piece to this, the other bit of announcement that they had, is that this thing called Azure Machine Learning, or Azure ML, comes out of the SQL space. So they had another bit of news with this, in that one of the things that they're doing now with Azure ML is they've made it easier for anyone to try Azure ML, because before it cost something to actually get in and actually play with it a bit. But now the service is available to test for free of charge without a subscription or a credit card. So anybody can get started with just a Microsoft account ID. So basically what they've done is they've created a free tier, and it's just making it one more way to make advanced analytics more accessible to customers, DBAs, developers, data scientists, all that stuff to kind of play around with it. And if you find that that's the right tool for the job, then you can then become a paid subscriber and go from there.
Gotcha. Hey, so Google are doing some fancy stuff in their cloud too around Docker.
Yeah.
And so I guess we should sort of wrap up the show with some Google news.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Docker is this concept of, I like to think of it as it's similar to IaaS, but it's kind of like IaaS in a box, if it makes sense. So instead of with IaaS, it was a traditional IaaS where you create a virtual machine and it's the whole operating system. One of the things that you have to do, what Docker allows you to do, is basically build these little containers, and they're almost like VMlets or small VMs, where you don't have to deal with a bunch of other management of the VM itself. Instead, you just kind of say, here's a configuration and here's the things I need installed, and then put your application in this container and let it run. So it's popular on Linux, supported by Microsoft Azure on the Windows VMs. But now Google is announcing that they're supporting it too with what they call the Google Container Engine. They said it's a new service. You can think of it as cluster as a service that's based on an open source project that Google's been working on called Kubernetes, which makes it easier for developers to manage their container clusters. And Kubernetes is actually something that Microsoft, I think, also supports the Kubernetes project as well on Azure. So yeah, it's amazing. Docker just was this little fad that everyone said is like the buzzword in the cloud that everyone wanted to support all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's suddenly just taken off, right? And everybody's adopting it. So I really need to dig into it a little more and play around with it, because I haven't had a chance to yet. But it certainly sounds really interesting, and especially since all the different cloud providers are kind of getting on board. I mean, it'll be a really important technology, because I think it'll mean that you can, write without having to necessarily think about all the intricacies of a platform and be able to run it in different places. But you described it as sort of like IaaS. I think it sort of feels to me like a mix of IaaS and PaaS, because you're taking some of the stuff from IaaS away, or abstracting it away from IaaS, but not to the whole degree that you are with PaaS. or platform as a service. So maybe, do you think it's fair to say it's kind of a love child of the two?
Yeah, it is. I think that the way you just described it is a better way to look at it than what I was just saying. I have cards on the table. I'm definitely in the camp of I don't get it, in the sense that I understand what it is and I understand the appeal that people have to it, or that there is appeal to it. But for me personally, I kind of look at it and just kind of say, why would you want to do this? Because I definitely want to, put forth the point that there's something I'm not getting. The part that I'm a little confused about is that if you're not doing a full-blown VM, putting an application inside the VM, that's one thing. You can create a small VM and leverage, get 100% utilization out of that small VM. You can go up bigger and bigger and bigger if your application has more requirements. The part that I don't really get is that I was listening to another podcast. I think the Azure podcast, they actually had a discussion with someone who understands Docker and understands Kubernetes and stuff about 5 to 10 episodes ago. But one of the guys was explaining that how he's like, how many of these Docker containers do you put on a Docker host, on a Docker VM? And he's like, you only put about 3 or 4 or 5 on a VM. And to me, I just kind of looked at it and just said, so you're going to spin up tons of VMs, which is a level of abstraction from the hardware, to create basically a Docker farm. And then I'm only going to be able to put 3 or 4 of these in each one of these containers. But Docker turns into being another level of abstraction. And so there's a certain level of kind of like, or there's a certain point where I kind of look at it, just you cock your head a little bit, squint your eyes, and you're asking like, how many levels of abstraction do you need to achieve this one thing? Obviously, I don't get it because Docker is incredibly popular with a lot of people right now. But that's just, from my take, I just kind of look at it and just be like, I'm having a hard time really understanding like what's so appealing about this one thing.
Yeah, maybe, I guess it's not been that easy on other platforms. And so, these things might not seem quite as innovative to us because we're kind of used to the Azure model, but for others it might be quite revolutionary.
Yeah.
I need to play around with it and have a look.
Agreed. Yeah, I'd like to sit there and kind of see how everything kind of shakes out. But
I guess if any listeners have been playing around with us, we'd love to get your input on this. So either send us an email or get in touch, and we'll invite you on the show to come talk about Docker. How about that?
Absolutely, we'd love to. And hey, speaking of like feedback, we got an email from someone actually yesterday into our site. They say they're going to leave a iTunes feedback for us too. But his name's Rick Zelznick. He says, AC and Chris, I want to take a moment to thank you guys for putting on such a consistently great show. Over the years, I found myself getting sucked into the weeds of client puzzles, particularly on the Fed and government and defense side of things. You're usually not looking at bleeding edge solutions, but your show helps me keep plugged into the big picture of things. I may not always agree with specific points. I think he's talking about UCJ. But nearly every episode pushes me to think bigger in one way or another. You motivate me. Thanks, guys. P.S. I'm not an iTunes guy, but per one of the recent episodes, and to further the cause, I'll use his wife's account to add another 5-star to the pool. So,
rock on.
Hey, Rick, thanks a lot for the feedback. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm really glad to hear that we got that. That's really cool. I love hearing people send us feedback when they've listened to the show and they enjoy it or they don't enjoy it. We're open to it all. So thanks very much for your feedback.
Absolutely, yeah. This is having feedback coming back. It's always nice to kind of get to see the reaction that people have to some of the episodes. I mean, at times we feel like we're talking in a vacuum. I enjoy doing it. We're going to keep doing it. But it's always good to get feedback. So thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, along similar lines, I'm at this conference over in the Netherlands here, and just out of the blue, this guy came up and said, "Hey, I listened to your show. Thanks very much for continuing to plug away at it and give me the information." And he uses it to keep up to date with everything that's going on, which was it makes me really happy that people are getting something out of it. So it's awesome. Me too. It's neat to kind of see those people come back and it's really cool to get that. Okay, cool. So we've covered a ton of different news. We got the Docker stuff from Google. We got the Dropbox. We got the stuff from Microsoft around Office for iOS and Android and things. And we've got a whole bunch of Azure news. So we've covered a lot. I think we should call this one a day and and follow up maybe in another show with some more news, and we'll try to get back on top of all the latest developments from all these cloud providers and pick it back up next week.
Sounds good to me. Hey, good talking to you. Another good discussion, CJ.
Yeah, thanks very much.
If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or MP3 and provide a link so we can play your question on the show. You can subscribe to us in iTunes by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find a full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.